Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live session. First things first, let's just test the audio and see how that's working out. So, for those who can hear me, please type in A1 in the chat box. So that way I make sure the audio is working properly. And before we dive into more questions, um, can everybody hear me? Hello, just type in one. You do hear me? Okay. All right. So, all right. What I'm going to do is just a couple of housekeeping items for those who are actually tuning in for the first time to this live audio, um, live video. Is that first things first? Normally, I ask all my subscribers to submit questions beforehand via email, so that way we can start the conversation, and that way we can also give time to other people to join in the meantime. And for those who actually manage to join right on time, they can have access to information. Then, once I'm done with all of the questions, then I'm going to open up the floor for all of you to start typing in whatever questions you might have that you ideally would like to have answered as part of today's live. So rather than the usual 1 hour, unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut down the live sessions down to 45 minutes due to availability. But I've been getting so many requests from all of you to continue to have this live sessions that I managed to squeeze it in into my calendar, but 45 minutes max. That's as much as I can go, at least for now. Hopefully, availability will make itself, available. And that way we can, have the full hour once again sometime in the future. So I'm going to dive into the questions. I've gotten a few from you guys. And the first one that I received actually was from Ramesh. And Ramesh actually asked, can you provide some pros and cons on taking a loan from your 401k and real estate? Now, this is a, let's say, what's the question? It's a bit of a challenging topic to talk about. It's a bit controversial because people have certain ways and how they view their retirement money. And for those who don't know what a 401k program is, for those who have just moved into the United States or watching from other parts of the world, a 401k is actually a retirement program, and it's sponsored by your employer. So when you sign up for the program, you can basically allocate a certain percentage of your salary, let's say 6 or 10%, and then your company will match whatever percentage they have depending on the company policies, like or stuff like that. So typically companies, what they have, it's sort of like a minimum. So let's say if you put 6% away, at least 6% away towards your retirement, we're going to give you 3% or something like that. If you do anything less than 6%, again, we'll have responsibilities. We'll have our duties to our family, children, parents. Maybe you cannot afford to put 6% away. Maybe you can only do 3% away. That's still fine. You're setting that money aside. It's just that your company will not contribute to that. So that money is actually housed at another company like Fidelity, or I can't think of the names right now, but basically they keep that money in-house and they invest with your money and different areas that they can invest in. They actually give you a catalog where you actually select from the comfort of the website of whoever is managing your 401k, and you can choose, I want to invest in these type of stocks or these type of mutual funds or whatever is it that they offer in that company. So over time, the idea is that as you invest that money, it's going to continue growing, and you are also getting quote unquote free money because you're also getting money from your employer. So over time, that portfolio that you have set aside for your retirement is going to continue to grow more and more. And hopefully by the time you hit 65 or like 63 and a half, I'm not entirely sure what's the retirement age, you could, take that money as a annuity, meaning every month you'll receive a certain income. So that way, hopefully, that will help you get a peace of mind because you physically won't be able to work anymore. So that way you will receive some amount of money that will facilitate a comfortable retirement. So the question was, should I take money away from my 401k in order to do real estate investment. Again, that all depends. It all depends on what you're looking for. So there's two ways that you can access your 401k money before your retirement. One is by withdrawing it, which I do not recommend. Never, never, ever withdraw your money from your 401k before retirement, because you're going to get hit with taxes at your current bracket, and you'll also get hit with a 10% penalty for taking the money out early. What I do, like at least in my case with my 401k, I actually borrow money against it. I borrow money against it, and I use that money to buy my rental properties. And then with the proceeds from the rent, I will pay the mortgage, and I will also use that same money and pay back my 401k. So the payment plans are actually very flexible in your 401k. The company actually works it out for you, and it's typically loans that could range from 3 to 5 years. It all depends on your 401k plan. Now, depending on the user, depending on the investor, some people like the idea of accessing their 401k, and some hate that as well. And I will think, or I would like to think that it depends on where you are in your stage in life, right? So are you getting closer to retirement and then you're holding on to that money because you have no other options? And if that's the case, then I will say don't take that money out of the 401k, because you might not know what's going to happen to you at that point in time. Or you could be so desperate that you might be thinking, oh my God, I have to give it all in. If I don't take action now, what's it going to like to be in retirement with no money and only depending solely on my 401k? That's, solely up to the investor. Now, for people who are on the younger side of the spectrum and their early 20s, even early 30s, right? You have a bit more of a wiggle room to play around with that money, because let's say if you lose it, then you can still rebuild it. Now, keep in mind that you can still lose your money even if you don't take it out, even if you don't borrow against it. You can lose money by keeping it in the portfolio, because, hey, the market, as you can see, the stock market goes like this all over the place. So your portfolio can mimic the same behavior, right? If they invest in something that loses value, your 401k portfolio can also lose value as well. So that's something that is just happens. It's just the cost of doing business. It's the risk that comes with doing investments, right? So when I borrow my 401k money, I have experienced certain comments, certain concerns from people that say, hey, for example, the number one concern that I get is that, hey, if you take your 401k, usually your 401k money is set with pre-tax money. With that, I mean by, let's say you get paid $3,000 a month. And if you take 10% out of it, $300 is going to go towards your 401k, and then you get taxed on the $2,700 that's remaining. That's usually how a 401k works. You could have the option to select the post-tax 401k, but most people use the pre-tax option of it because it helps you save more money in taxes. So when you borrow money against it, right, you're basically repaying that 401k with post-tax money. I find that, in my opinion, to be something silly, because if you were to use your own savings and if you were to purchase a mortgage, right, you are paying that mortgage back with post-tax money anyway. So what difference does it make, right? It's still post-tax money regardless. That's one. The second concern that I've been getting is, well, if you take money out of your 401k, if you borrow against it, well, every time I say if I take money out of your 401k, we're talking about borrowing against it. So if you borrow money against your 401k, then your portfolio will not grow as much. Well, it could lose money too, right? If you leave it there, depending on what the market fluctuation is. And the idea is that if you are using money from your 401k to invest in real estate, the expectation, or at least, is that you will think that you have done the proper due diligence to make sure that that is a deal that is worthy of your investment. And therefore, whatever money that you're getting in return, your ROI, should compensate with whatever amount that you are not getting in your 401k. So the whole idea is diversification, right? It's not putting all of your eggs in one basket. So you have your money in your 401k, but at the same time, you're leveraging that to invest in real estate. So now you have two forms of investment. You're diversifying your risk, because if the stock market crash, hey, maybe you can, compensate for that in your real estate investment, or vice versa, right? And so thinking that hey, it might not grow. What's to say it's not going to grow? If you did your proper due diligence, that means your property value could go up, whatever rent could go up, and you might be making more money off of the rental than leaving the money of your 401k. What if your 401k is giving you a 4% return, but then your rental is giving you a 10% return? You're making a 6% difference that is going to be all for you. So again, just perspective, but I can understand some people, they tend to be more fearful because, hey, maybe that's all they have. And if that's the case, then it's something that you need to ask yourself, hey, will that work for me? Am I comfortable taking this level of risk? If not, then I will consider, I will suggest you to actually venture out into different routes rather than leveraging money from your 401k. I have done it because, again, I'm relatively young and I can always make up for that money down the road. So that's my take on it. The next question, I believe, is also, give me one sec when I scroll through this. Can you shed some light on how to invest in a market recession? So the way I'm going to answer this question is going to be at a very high level because it's a lot more extensive than that, and it will take a lot of history to get that answer. So in a nutshell, there are always opportunities, whether it's in a market upturn or in a market downturn. So let's say, for example, if you are in a market upturn and you know that the property values are increasing over and over time and over time and over time, then you will apply one type of real estate investment strategy, I will say. So let's say, for example, house flippers, right? I've seen it in HGTV. You buy a beautiful home, you make it look pretty, you tear down some walls, and then you bring up the value, and then you sell it or you refinance out of it. That's the right market timing for you to invest in properties like that, because what you want is just to get the equity out of it as fast as you can. Now, in a market downturn, there are always opportunities because houses are cheaper. Yes, lending gets stricter, but that's why you educate yourself. So you work on your credit history, you learn about other ways to get access to funding so you can utilize that money for down payment, and then you buy properties that are actually cheaper, right? So that's in essence, in a nutshell, at a high level, how we'll actually respond to that question. And I know a lot of this probably stems from the fear of what happened back in 2008, where the market hit. Just keep in mind that there's always a recession in the economy every 7 years, every 10 years. But what happened in 2008 was everything combined. So it was not just the real estate crash. It was a real estate crash. It was a recession. It was everything else happening at the same time. And that's why it felt like it was such a massive thing, that it was so horrible that, it was unfathomable. And it just happened because it just, when it rains, it pours, like Murphy's Law, right? So everything happened around that time. Another factor that actually contributed to that was the lack of education, the lack of visibility into what is it that people were investing in. So there were a lot of mortgages that were either interest only, that homeowners did not know that they were signing because there was a lack of transparency. The mortgage documents did not really indicate that. So let's say, for example, and this happened actually to one of my best friends at the time. Back then, she was 25, and they bought this beautiful home in New Jersey, big yards. Their two dogs were running around, and I used to love to go visit them. It was a very nice house. And right around that time, I had just graduated from college. And obviously, when you're graduating, you're broke. And I couldn't really seem to make up why or how was it possible for them to have access to such a big house. It was a beautiful house. And I was like, so I decided to ask. And back then I didn't really understand much either. I just listened. So in essence, what happened is they were able to buy a property with no money down, right? No down, just go in, sign the mortgage paperwork and leave. And what's interesting is that the mortgage payments were relatively low. So there were only like, I think $1,000 or $2,000 for a house that was worth over $500,000 at the time. That's relatively low. And so what they were explaining me is that for the first year or two, what you could do is just to choose either one of the payments that will give you options. So given my friends, they selected the lowest one because they thought that if we pay extra towards that, there will be money towards the equity. But what they didn't know that happened was that those $1,000 to $2,000, it was only interest. They weren't contributing anything towards the equity of that property. So meaning after 2 years, all that we're paying to the bank was actually interest, and they still owed $500 plus whatever else was accumulated at the time. So they found themselves paying money towards it. It was basically like paying to a house that they never owned, that on paper it seemed like they owned, but they never did. So that was one of the reasons, right? One of the products that was actually available at the time. And, as you can foresee, my friends, they lost the house, right? So that was one scenario. Another scenario was that they were investing in mortgages that were adjustable, the ARM, adjustable rate mortgages, ARM, and those mortgages will basically shift in time. So let's say, for example, if you go back to 2006 or 7 when there was still that everything was booming at the time. So let's say, for example, usually ARMs are adjustable every year or every 3 years. So let's say you have a 30-year mortgage and you will read in the mortgage paperwork something that says 333. That means every 3 years, the mortgage interest rates are going to adjust. So you're going to say, let's say you start off your mortgage with 6% or something like that, right? So you're paying 6% in that mortgage for the first 3 years. Then after those 3 years is going to adjust, but because the economy was actually going all the way like this, and then it took a dip, every time those interest rates reset, they were paying a higher rate. So they started at 6%. 3 years later, when it reset, they were paying 8%. And then 3 years later, when it reset, they were paying 10%. And that, in retrospect, if you think about it, if you're depending on your rental money to cover that mortgage, every time that mortgage resets, that means you're going to be in the negative. That means you're going to have to put money out of your pocket in order to keep up with the mortgage payments. And ultimately, it was only a matter of time before it became too much, and people just, decided to default in the mortgage payments because they just simply cannot afford that anymore. We're talking about a time where people did not have to show evidence or prove that they could in fact afford that mortgage. Anyone could come in and buy a $500,000 house. Anyone could come in and buy a $600,000-$700,000 house, even though your salary was, let's say, $30,000, right? And now there's more transparency around that subject, because now they need to see, or the banks need to see your bank statements. They need to see that you are in fact making what you're claiming that you're making, and therefore they will use that as a benchmark to determine how much money you get to get approved for, so to speak. So that's in a nutshell what it is. Again, there's a lot that goes into the whole market downturn thing, but that's in essence just a bit of a history, so you can understand that that was contributed to like how things became such a big mess. So market recession hits. Okay, so the next question I got was actually from Gladys, and she actually asked me this. She's actually one of my students, but she asked me that question more like for herself, but I figured that it was going to be very applicable in this YouTube live so that everyone can get access to that information. Opinion on secure business card versus Fund and Grow. So if you guys have seen an episode of Fund and Grow is basically a company that helps real estate investors or any investors or business owners actually get access to unsecured business credit cards, right? So before I dive into any further into that, let's just take a step back and sort of like talk about the distinctions between secure credit and unsecured credit for those who don't know. So a secure credit, think of it, it's a mortgage, right? It is secure by your property. Same thing with car loans. It is secure by your car. That's why you get access to higher amounts, whether it's $100,000, whether it's $500,000 in the event of a mortgage, right? Because if you fail to fulfill your responsibility to pay that loan, what they're going to do is that they're just simply take your house away. But with credit cards, it's a little bit challenging, because if you are simply applying for a credit card, they are blindly giving you money, right? They trust your profile and your FICO score. But in essence, if you default and that debt and that credit card debt, there's no way that they could go after you unless it's taking you to collection or taking you to court. But there's nothing physical, there's no asset that they can take away from you because it's unsecured. So that's in essence what that means. So Fund and Grow, it's a service company, and they help you get access to business credit card, which I think it's great because you get to keep that separate from your personal credit, right? So a lot of investors sometimes tend to fear about the use of credit cards for their real estate investment because they are thinking, well, if it appears in my credit that I owe this much money, I might not get approved for the mortgage. And there's multiple factors that go into that decision making. Yes, your credit is one of them, but it's more than that. It's not the only factor. So for those who want to get more access to funding, a bigger access to capital, doing it through the business credit cards, it's the way to go because typically, like I said, well, one, actually, you do not impact your personal credit by getting access to business credit. And then two, normally you will get access to higher credit limits because it's a business. So the expectation is you have money to actually repay that debt. And also you will need access to higher capital because you are running a business and therefore you need more to be able to propel your business going forward. So that's that question. The next question I have, let me just scroll down just to make sure I am not missing anything. So the next question I had was, what's more convenient? So let's say, for example, if I have a mortgage payment, right, today at, let's say, $1,500, but I get the option to do a refinance and pay $1,300 out of it and save $200 every month, which one is it going to be? Which option is better? So first things first, let's just take a step back and analyze your current mortgage. So how much have you paid down in that mortgage? How much equity do you actually own? And how much time do you have left and paying that mortgage at $1,500, right? And then for the new refinance, even though you're paying $1,300, you're saving yourself, quote unquote, $200. Is it going to be over the life of how much you owe? Meaning, if you have 10 years left, is it only for 10 years, or is it $1,300 for another 30 years? And if that's the case, it sounds like you're going to be paying more dollars in interest unless you plan to use the additional money to actually bring down that debt in order to, pay it off faster. It's difficult to determine. You were going to have to do some of the calculations. And in fact, there's actually a video called, I think, How to Pay Off Your Mortgage Fast, where you get access to a mortgage tool that you can actually download and just simply do the calculations yourself and see where is it that you're going to get the most out of it or save more money in terms of interest rate, whether keeping your existing mortgage with some of the equity in it or doing a refinance and then just simply paying it. Now, refinancing your property is not the same thing as a cash out refi. When you're doing a cash out refi, you're getting equity out of it in exchange of money, right? So you can use that money to invest in someplace else. Refinance is just simply extending that loan to a certain number of years in hopes that it will decrease your current monthly payments. So that way it becomes a lot more flexible for you to repay back. So that's in essence what it is. I'm going to pause here and actually open up the floor. I do have some questions here, but like I said, the call is actually for 45 minutes. So I want to make sure everyone gets the opportunity to ask questions and the live chat. So feel free to ask away while I'm here. We have until 2:15 Eastern time before this call is ended. So I see I see people online. So feel free to ask away. Just type in into the chat box. Okay, so while I wait, I'm going to scroll down to some of the questions here, but please ask away. The reason why I'm doing this is to give everyone the opportunity to ask questions. Otherwise, it will defeat the purposes of having these calls. So all right, so while that it's updating, let me scroll through the questions that I have here, and also check my email just to make sure that no one has sent a question separately. What are my thoughts on online auctions? Oh, hey, Marco. I see you tuning in. So crypto, online auctions. It all depends on one, whether the deal does make sense. And at the same time, whether you have the cash readily available to invest or not. So I haven't really invested in online auctions. I have heard of situations where people have gone to court, in fact, and they have actually do the auction themselves in the courthouse. And what I can do is to share that experience. But I specialize in buy and hold. I know that there are YouTube channels out there that talk about online auctions. I just haven't had the need to do something like that. And again, it should be a great strategy because otherwise other people wouldn't be doing it. But the experience that I got from the investor that did an auction in person and the courthouse was that I think this person was actually interested in investing in a house that was worth over $1 million. And he only had, I think, enough to just reserve that spot, like as a buyer. And typically what court would allow you to do is just to come up with the rest of the money within 24 hours. So most investors have two choices. They can either show up with a money lender and have the money lender, put the difference, or just simply build a relationship with a mortgage broker or lender that you have done business with in the past, and then just quickly get that turned around so that the next day you get approved for that mortgage. You prepay, well, not prepay, you preset all of the paperwork, you get it all ready. And then by the time you show up to court, it's all a matter of finding out how much is it going to be for that property after all the auctions are over. And then your lender will just, go ahead and give the approval. And then you can come up with the money the very next day and just simply purchase the property and, just invest away with it, whether you want to flip it or whether you want to fix it and then just hold it for a long time. That's the closest experience that I've had to a auction. But again, I haven't done anything that it's online in terms of auction, so I wouldn't be able to answer that question in detail. So, oh yeah, Anthony's saying Marco is here. Marco is our editor for YouTube videos. So let's just give him a very warm welcome. Thank you for joining, Marco, today. He's the one that makes all of the magic happen in the YouTube videos and also save us so much time in terms of editing and made it all available for you guys. Yeah, sure, crypto. Sorry, I don't really have a straight answer to that, but I will try to look into it and see if I know a couple of peers that might have done that. And I will probably maybe even create a video about that sometime in the future. So any other questions that people might have in the chat? What I'm going to do, I'm going to refer back to my list just so that we can keep this going because we only have 15 minutes left. So I want to make sure we get the best out of this call. But if you do have some questions that you would like to ask, feel free to drop them in the chat box so that way we can just answer them away. So let's see. The other question that I have, the font is a little small, so let me just see. So this question was actually from an international investor. And this question goes as follows. Hello, I have a house in the United States that has had some equity. And I would like to do a cash out refi of it, but I am actually outside of the country. Is that going to be a possibility for me to do so or not? So I think that will all depend. You are going to have to inquire about what the requirements are from the banks. I know that HSBC offers mortgages for international investors. However, I haven't really looked into what the requirements are for refinances, cash out refinances. I know that typically when you apply as an international investor from overseas, they will typically ask you to provide either a EIN for your LLC because the expectation is that if you open up an LLC to do business in the US, then you therefore will have a US address to have that LLC, and then use your ETIN number in conjunction to that, and then get approved by that. But it's a question that it's difficult for me to answer because I don't. I'm not the bank, and those requirements are usually changing. But normally, what they would like to see is that you will have a credit history established in this country, whether it's through your ETIN or through your EIN for your business and your DUNS. And at the same time, that you do have a physical address or a mailing address here in the US that they can use as a point of reference in order to get that. Now, everything else in terms of how much equity do you have to have, or what's the ratio, how much they're going to approve to you, what's the necessary FICO score, that will all change depending on the bank. So it's all a matter of you reaching out to the bank and see if something can be worked out over the phone or via email. You provide them the documentation that they need to see. And then if you do need to come in person to the US, then you could do so. But I have closed mortgages long distance. Like, I haven't had the need to go to the state where I'm investing in the property. All I needed to do was just to sign the paperwork in front of a public notary, someone who can actually verify that that signature is in fact mine. And the way you do that is by showing your driver's license or any form of government ID, call it your passport, and they can actually compare the two signatures. And then you sign it, you make a copy, you email a soft copy back so they can get the paperwork going. And then the next thing, you package the original paperwork, the one that you signed with ink, and you will FedEx it back to the bank, so that way they will have the package within 12 or 24 hours, depending on whether it falls on a weekend or a holiday, and they have that paperwork readily available and you can close. But so you do not need to be present for closing, but as an international investor, again, you have to work that out with your lender. So thanks for your question. I have Samba here. Hey, Samba, is it a good idea to start a multifamily or single family as a beginner? I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest, because I think it all depends on the level of comfort that each investor has. I started off with single families because it was just simply easier for me. Again, I was working full time and going to school at the time. So I didn't want to get into anything that it was a major project. But I have heard of students, I've met students who have invested in a multifamily, and all it takes for a property to be a multifamily is it's to have a two-family, right? Like, you can get a duplex yourself. You can live in one place and rent out the next, or you can just simply take a two-family house, and it's relatively easy to manage in a way because you're not going to different places. You're actually going to one place, collect rent in that one place, and just simply do maintenance at that one place. I think the key question has to come down with access to funding that you can utilize as a down payment. You can do a down payment relatively, I would say it is relatively easier to come up with the down payment of a single family than for a duplex, because you will think that because the property is bigger, therefore it will require more money. But if you're buying it to live in one side of it, right, then you can qualify for mortgages like an FHA, and therefore you will put less money, quote unquote, towards the down payment, and then you can rent it out. And then after a year, you can move out, you can refinance that property after you've gained a certain amount of equity, right? And then you can just simply do rinse and repeat. You can just find another duplex or a triplex or a four family that all counts as a residential property. And then you can maybe go bigger, get a four family, right? A fourplex. And you do the same thing, an FHA loan, 5% down or 3% down, depending on your credit history or your profile. Then you rent out the other three, and then you live there for a year. And then after a year, you can refinance to a regular mortgage, and then you take that FHA and then you just move on to the next property. So you can actually do that. You're only allowed to have one FHA loan at a time. And that's why I say you need to refinance the mortgage out of it. But hopefully, after a year, by you paying down the mortgage, you have actually accumulated enough equity that will allow you to, in fact, just use it as a down payment for that refinance. So hopefully that answered your question, Samba. Feel free to ask more away. Marco is asking, is it a good idea to buy a property for commercial purposes, or is it more difficult than residential properties? That's a great question, Marco. So let's just take a step back. There are residential properties up to 4 families, and there are commercial properties, meaning 5 families or above, or a property that has a commercial storefront, regardless of the number of families that it has, or has a office space. But I'm talking about a commercial office space because I know that some of us have houses where we keep a room as a home office, so that doesn't count as commercial. It has to be a commercial office space. And the major distinction between the two when you're going to apply for mortgages is that for residential mortgages, it is based on your income. So if you declare, let's say, $30,000 a year in your taxes, and you use that to apply for a residential mortgage, the most the banks are going to lend you is 3 to 4 times the amount that you declare in gross profit in a year. And why 3 to 4 times? Because it could vary depending on your FICO score. So let's say, for example, if you have an excellent FICO score and you have had a great relationship with money and you can evidence that you have everything in place, you know how to budget and everything, then they can lend you up to 4 times, which will be the equivalent of 3 times 4, $120,000 max. But if your credit is okay, it could be better, but it's not bad, then maybe up to 3 times, which is the equivalent of $90,000. When you're talking about commercial properties, you come out of the equation. They will base the amount that they're going to loan you based on the income potential of the property. So the higher the leases, the more secure the leases, the longer you have the leases signed up for, whether it's 2, 3 years or even 15 years for commercial spaces, then they're going to leverage that to determine the amount of money that they can lend you. This is how you see certain students or certain real estate investors not really making a lot of money on the books in their tax return, but all of a sudden they're having access to a $1 million mortgage that it's going to allow them to buy that commercial real estate investment property. So those are the key distinctions. So is it a good idea or not? That will be depending entirely up to you. Again, keep in mind that usually when you're starting in real estate, Marco, the biggest challenge is usually to come up with the down payment. And unless you have all of that saved up, or unless you know other strategies or other creative ways to fund that down payment, you're usually limited to how much you can save. And that's why in this channel, we talk about the use of perhaps your 401k, or perhaps getting access to business credit cards at 0% APR. So that way you can leverage that money as a down payment to invest in your real estate portfolio, or just simply, try to figure out another way to, okay, maybe I don't have to come up with all that money in savings. Maybe I can do an FHA, but having an FHA is not going to be an option for a residential, for a commercial mortgage. It is great in the sense that you are coming out of the equation, but you still need to work that out. And unless you have the funding or the people or the resources to come up with that creative form of payment, then it could get a little bit challenging to make that happen. Pablo, hi from Los Angeles. Hello, Pablo. Welcome to the channel. Let's see. Crypto. I have an FHA loan for my primary residence. So are you saying I will have to refinance to a conventional loan in order to obtain another FHA? Yes, that is correct. Last time I checked, according to the rules, people are only allowed to have one FHA loan at a time. That's the way it's been set up. And FHA is just meant so a fair housing something. I forgot what it stands for, but the purpose of that loan was actually meant to help out people with low income resources, so that way they can have access to their first home, right? Or maybe people who are trying to build up their credit, because the requirement in terms of credit is actually lower. I think that for an FHA loan, you will typically need a 620, and then you should be able to qualify. Contrary to popular belief, you don't really need an 800 credit score in order to qualify for a mortgage. So like I said, there are multiple factors that are taken into account in order to get approved for a mortgage. Your FICO score is definitely a big component of it, but a lot more goes into that. You have to evidence how stable your income is. Can you really afford to pay that mortgage back long term, what your spending habits is like. That's why they ask for so many things. They ask for a copy of your tax return, your pay stubs, references. A lot goes into the equation to make that decision and in the underwriting process. So, all right. So, any other questions? We have 5 minutes left before I end this call, and I have to jump on my next one in the Spanish channel because I have a couple of questions over there as well that I would like to tackle and help my Hispanic audience as well. So 5 minutes left, last call. I do have one more question in that list. So if no one has anything, or maybe if you're typing it in, I'm gonna give some time for that to come in while I answer this other question. So let me just jump into this really quickly. So this question is it's actually a very interesting one, and I'm sure a lot of you could have experienced this at some point in your life, or maybe will have the potential to experience this sometime down the road. So the question I have here is, I invested in the real estate back in 2008, and I had 3 properties at the time. But unfortunately, given what happened, I lost everything. Now, a couple of years afterwards, over a decade, now I am ready to get back in the game and start investing in real estate. However, my wife is petrified of that, and she does not want to do real estate. She does not want to know anything that has to do with real estate whatsoever. What would you recommend me to do? And again, fears, it's usually caused by lack of education, not knowing certain things. So the best way that you can go about it is to try to explain your wife what I just shared earlier in the call, in terms of history, right? This is what really happened. There was a lack of transparency in certain items, and therefore we didn't know anything about it. But now there are rules. Dodd-Frank, Congress, they have set rules now to protect the consumers so that we can have access to information and are in fact aware of what we're signing. You can actually read your mortgage packages now, and they're like this thick. They're a big stack of paper with all the details. And if you don't know how to read legal language, that's why you invest in a good attorney who will vouch for your well-being, who will protect your asset, who will represent you in that legal matter, so you can understand exactly what's in that legal language and you know exactly what you're signing for. That's one. Another way to go about it, and I'm just here getting creative because, again, I'm not here to cause a divorce or anything like that, but it all starts with education, right? Another way to go about it is just to start like doing something small and start like showing her the facts. You can leverage this channel, or you can just simply sort of like educate. Look, the facts are actually accurate. This is something that we didn't do in the past. This is what I'm learning right now. Remember the lessons learned. Hey, we didn't really do this in the past. Maybe this is what we failed. So that way she can start seeing the distinctions amongst the two, and maybe take that as a stepping stone for you to continue to educate her and get her acclimated into the next stage, and hopefully she'll be willing to invest here and there. The best way is to show by action, and then just educate, and educate. Simba, you're welcome. Crypto, I'll join the Spanish stream too. Awesome, since I'm learning Spanish. Awesome. I will see you there in the Spanish video. So I'm going to type the channel here because I'm not sure if you know the name of the Spanish channel. It's called Nova Raiz Latino, for those who want to tune in and practice their Spanish and learn Spanish. So feel free to do that. Pablo, do you have a link in the comments for your Spanish channel? I'm going to ask my boyfriend to send it to me really quickly. Oh, he just IN'd me. Hold on. Let me just look it up really quick. Oh, he's going to put it in the description, so that way you guys have it. He also wanted me to talk a little bit about the mentorship program, just to give you guys a heads up. So recently, I think it was earlier this week, I actually released a video formally announcing that I have a mentorship program. Before that, I was mentoring students here and there. but I didn't make it into a formal thing like, oh yes, you can actually access the program now through this link, because I wasn't really sure about my own bandwidth, and if I want, I could, be as serve as a good mentor myself as well. So after taking in a couple of students and learning a one-on-one, not just them from me, but also me learning from them, we I'm very appreciative of the experience. Now we are at that place, and this company and myself, that I have formally created a program that I can take more and more students, because it has been streamlined. The process has been streamlined. Before it was more of a one-on-one, it was more of a manual process, but now I can take a much bigger volume. And what happens is that we exchange emails back and forth. The classes are actually delivered online, but the back and forth between the emails are meant to help with one-off questions, and stuff like that. At the same time, there's also a private Facebook group for my students where they get to ask questions that are strictly related to the real estate deals, because those are a little bit challenging to answer here via YouTube, because one, I haven't done the analysis, I haven't seen the analysis that the student has done, and that's why I always try to refrain myself from answering any questions without knowing the ins and outs of the deals. That's why the YouTube calls are usually more general, and the Facebook lives are more like ingrained. They're more in detail. We go over stuff like that. And also the goal is to create a very strong community of like-minded individuals, so they can network with one another, not just learn from one another, but at the same time connect, right? Let's say they attended one of the Facebook live chats, and all of a sudden they realize, hey, I'm going through a similar situation. Let me talk to my mentor, me in this case, but at the same time, let me reach out to the student. Maybe they know something. Maybe they can share a little bit of an experience. Sometimes people get a bit embarrassed to ask questions. I don't know why, because I'm one of those who are always asking questions. And they feel more comfortable reaching out to a peer, someone who's actually starting off like they are, and therefore they feel that they're sort of like in a more of a comfort zone to ask those questions. So that's part of the community. So I wanted to let that out for you guys. And if you are interested, again, there's a webinar that I created. You can actually sign up for that webinar. It's free. It's packed with a lot of information. So make sure that when you join, you have pen and paper ready so that you can take a lot of notes. If after that you still have questions, you can still always schedule a call with me, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. So let me see what else. Sorry, I made a mistake. Okay, Vladimir, no worries. I think my boyfriend sent the link to an Overrise Latino, so you guys can always join. And I think shortly he's gonna send the link to the live. But if not, when you access the Spanish channel, you will see also the announcement for the Spanish live. So you're more than welcome to join over there. So we have gone over the 45-minute mark. I do have to leave. I would love to stay, but I do have to leave and prep for my next video. So thank you so much. Feel free to send me any questions, or just drop a question down in the comments box below. I do read all my comments. I do try my very best to answer all my comments. And if there's a way that I can see, I can create an episode for everyone's benefit, I will do that as well. So happy Saturday. Thank you so much for joining, and I will see you guys soon next time in the next live session. So take care, enjoy a nice weekend. Bye-bye. Oops, that's how you end it. Okay.